Hello, my name is Ruby Sykes. Welcome to the oral presentation portion of HCS323, the Social Work Placement PPA strand. I just want to apologise in advance for my voice. I have laryngitis, so I might sound a little bit funky as we're going through this recording, but hopefully everything that I'm saying makes sense. For this assignment, I've decided to start off with what I would like to learn in this subject. I have a couple of quotes up the top that I thought really highlighted the way I want to learn and how I understand learning in social work. So social work learning is usually understood to include the development of skills and competencies which enable practitioners to undertake a role which is rooted in human rights and social justice, where ethical practice needs to be negotiated within a work role where there are competing moral, legal, organisational and policy demands. Critical reflection has been identified as a process through which professionals, particularly those in caring professions, can build their sense of professional purpose. Some of the things I'm quite keen to learn and expand on are developing a better understanding of how reflective practice can improve my social work, both now as I'm a sort of a young, almost social worker and throughout my social work career. I'm sure that I'll look back in 10 years and I'll have a lot of reflecting to do. Next, learn more about mental health social work, just as a sort of space and counselling skills that social workers typically use and how to sort of achieve this, what this looks like. That's something that's quite fascinating to me. I would like to focus more on how my own life experiences, personal and professional, shape my social work journey. So I think that doing the written portion of this assessment was really helpful in that. I got to look at different theories that I've used in my sort of social work adjacent role, and I'm keen to do more of that sort of assessment. And finally, linking to the last thing I said, what theories or practice works best for me as a future social worker? What's been working? What might I try next? Trying to branch out. Gaps in my knowledge and experience. This slide has a lot of links to the latter slide, but I have quite limited experience working with other qualified social workers. I've worked with teachers, psychologists, learning support assistant, disability advocates, case managers, so many wonderful helping professions, but not specifically other social workers as much. And as a result, I haven't really had many opportunities to engage in meaningful supervision or group supervision. So I'm keen to learn more what that looks like and how I can implement that in my practice. I'm keen to learn more about social work and the law, particularly relating to vulnerable people, as social workers are often, in the courtrooms, in prison settings, all that stuff. I'd love to learn more about that. I would love to learn more about the Code of Ethics. I have a pretty basic understanding of it, but I would love to learn more about how I can balance this with sort of competing obligations of my work, for example. That is something that's quite fascinating. Speaking of the Code of Ethics, we're going to jump into the next slide, and I've put what kind of social worker do I want to be as the next slide with having regard to the AASW Code of Ethics. Many of the ethics align with my personal values and goals for my professional career as a social worker, and this is simply because they relate to bettering the lives of vulnerable people. Many aspects of the Code of Ethics that align with my aspects of the Code of Ethics that align with my personal values in particular include commitment to social justice and human rights, cultural safety and sensitivity, and ethical decision making. And I think all of these are quite heavily linked. For example, commitment to social justice and human rights. Within the Code of Ethics, it states social workers have a responsibility to demonstrate respect and fairness in their interactions with others, particularly dealing with their service users within cultural safety and sensitivity. It states social workers have a responsibility to acknowledge the significance of culture in their practice, recognising the impact of their own social location, views and biases, and how this can have an impact on practice and culturally diverse service users and colleagues. I think as social workers, we get the privilege of working with particularly vulnerable groups of people and sort of stripping it down and having the basic sort of we care about people, we want to help people as the baseline of our practice is really significant. I think it's also important to remember that while I mentioned that I would love to learn more about theories and have that guide my practice, I think equally we do need to have the Code of Ethics, other sort of hand guiding us along as well. Whilst I was doing research for this assessment, I looked at lots of different articles, lots of different opinion pieces based on Australian social workers' views of ethics, and I found this graphic really helpful. In the middle, in the grey bubble, we have the biggest sort of core thing that social workers need to rely on, and that's our ethics and values and the Australian Code of Ethics and, that focus on social justice and the greater good. And then we have theories and methods, which is what I just mentioned. So that's like the systems theory, the social learning theory. Then we have knowledge and co-creation, that's supervision and collaborating with others. That's me at university at the moment. Then we have experience, so that's my years and years working as at the school, and then skills. So that's sort of the soft skill stuff that we learn, like talking to people, being empathetic, active listening. And I think this little graph really emphasised for me what sort of social worker I want to be. So having a really solid base of the 3 particular ethical considerations I just mentioned, and sort of having all of these skills mixed together. Out of all the questions in this oral portion of the assessment, I found this one the most difficult, the comparing and contrasting my values and vision for practice with those of the social work profession. I think my answer for this is quite similar to the what sort of social worker do I want to be. I think a lot of my values align with what the Code of Ethics sets out, maintaining learning, maintaining connection, social justice, all those things. I found another really wonderful quote, and I think this perfectly reflects the answer, my answer to this question and to the what sort of social worker do I want to be question. So my definition of social work is a profession that supports people within the context of their circumstances. So meeting people where they are. Social workers are change makers, advocates and social justice seekers. Shout out to the Code of Ethics. Social workers exist at every stage of a person's life, from birth to death, and exist in every level of the system, hence my interest in law and mental health. Social workers empower people and communities and promote social change and development. So again, that's that cultural safety, that's that ethical decision making, all that wonderful human rights stuff. I would like to leave you with a funny little picture that I found. This is a very sort of theory-based social work joke, but how many social workers does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope it all made sense. Thank you. Goodbye.